this man or his parents. Even centuries before there was any sort of scientific inquiry, people were demanding answers for life's perplexing questions. Something is wrong, someone is at fault, someone is to blame. Humans cope better with explanations, with answers, even when the answers we get are wrong. We simply do not like ambiguity. Darkness is uncomfortable. Many years ago in another parish, I sat through an hour-long presentation by a respected ophthalmologist in the parish on the scientific explanation for Paul's blindness on the Damascus Road. I remember thinking, does everything have to have a rational explanation? Would that make Paul's calling more powerful? Does everything require statistical certainty? Sometimes the mud in our eyes falls off, and reality simply becomes, thanks be to God. As I began to reflect on today's gospel, and you have to admit there's a lot to reflect on, I'm most grateful to Connie McCarroll, who's a deacon in the diocese, for reading that. I kept hearing as I reflected the Christmas carol, "Do you see what I see?" And then I thought of the adage from graduate school, "What you see depends on where you stand." Standing in the early years of the 21st century, there is no possible way that I can see what the disciples observed 2 millennia ago. No matter how good my scholarship, and it's not all that sharp, all our traditions, beliefs, values are colored by the society, the family, the tribe, the village in which we live and move and have our being. I even imagine that in first century Palestine, the worldview in the area of Galilee had a different shade from that in Jerusalem. We live in a society where laser surgery is done to improve the vision of tiny premature infants, and cataract surgery is simply assembly line routine. So in response to a question like, "How are your eyes open?" we can simply reply, "No problemo. I went to the clinic where one of those guys who advertise on TV, and now I can see." But as the gospel makes clear, not all blindness is physical. The man can see. The crowd, including the disciples, continues to stare into the dark. We are prone to do the same. Certain of our cherished beliefs, we overlook the Messiah who is standing before us. One way to open our eyes is to open ourselves to another's experience. We see through lenses that color who they are and how they see. To shine the light of Christ into the chasm that separates us gives us help. Sometimes, if we speak a different language, that can be a positive, not a negative. For when you cannot speak to someone, you can learn a lot by listening with your eyes. When you cannot run your mouth, perhaps you can open your eyes and hopefully your heart. In Stephen Ministry Training, we talk a lot about listening, being present, and not talking. When working at the medical center, I led a support group for pregnant women who were drug addicts. Prior to meeting these women, I had many preconceived notions about folks who used illegal drugs. And then I met Annie and Krista and Jen and Katie and Heather. My eyes were open to a life I absolutely cannot imagine. Likewise, many of us in what are arrogantly known as the first world countries are confident that we have the answers to the problems of the developing world. Reading the op-ed pages of the newspaper, it's easy to get the impression that if everyone were just like us, there would be no world problems. My response, how many composting toilets have you ever made? There's nothing like a group of suburbanites mixing mortar and hauling cement block with Tono and Angel to level the playing field. With mud in one's eyes, it's easy to go to Guatemala and see poverty, corruption, violence, trash. But then you miss Guatemala. You miss the joy, the hope, the generosity. You would miss the invitation to the one-year-old's birthday party, the invite to play games, to meet people who accept you like the very best of family. You wouldn't see the spotless white uniforms worthy of Tide and Maytag commercials, but achieved through grit and scrubbing. If you focused on the rutted roads and the mudslides, you would miss the people. You would miss Gustavo and Otilia and Luis and Julio and Lourdes and Helmut and Dr. Adela. And of course, you would miss Danny and Chris. And if your idea of a nun, a professed religious, is Whoopi Goldberg and nonsense, or the Mother Superior in The Sound of Music, you'd miss Danny and Chris too. You would skip the fun of sitting with Institute students, practicing their English, and then rolling in laughter as you practice your high school Spanish. Travelers to Guatemala built a latrine and received a feast for the soul, as well as eggs and rice and beans, which were quietly reshared. The little vases here don't hold any water, so they hold everlastings, a reminder of wonderful friendships forged over 10 days, 2 weeks. Sitting in the moss-covered prayer garden, one reflects on the day that was, sensing that this is one of those earthly places where one feels the presence of God. In Guatemala, government is by and for the people, as long as the people are wealthy and well-connected. The remaining 99+% are not beaten down and dejected. There is community, caring, creativity. And here I could insert a sermon on immigration reform, but another day. For the 30+ of us who from St. Mark's have traveled to La Labor as pilgrims and as day laborers, and to Antigua and Adelan as tourists, no one, as far as I know, has returned depressed, dejected, but positive, energized, excited, the mud washed from their eyes. The fruit of the light of Christ's presence is found in all that is good and right and true. The following is on a plaque which hangs in the guest house at La Labor. Our first task in approaching another people, another culture, another religion, is to take off our shoes, and I would add our blinders. For the place we are approaching is holy, else we find ourselves treading on another stream. More serious still, we may forget that God was here before we arrived. Welcome to Danny and Chris, who are the light in La Labor.